We shall commence this module by discussing about the theory of second best, Arrow's impossibility theorem. The theory of second best concerns a situation when one or more optimality conditions cannot be satisfied. Arrow's impossibility theorem also says that any social welfare function, that is SWF, cannot satisfy all the optimality conditions simultaneously. These optimality conditions include non-dictatorship, unrestricted domain, weak Pareto criteria, and independence of irrelevant alternatives. Rawls' theory of justice builds on the social contract tradition to offer an alternative to utilitarianism. Rawls singles out justice, not maximum welfare or efficiency, as the first virtue of social institutions. Learning outcomes. After studying this module, you shall be able to know about the theory of second best, understand Arrow's impossibility theorem, understand Rawls' theory of justice. First, we discuss the theory of second best. When one optimality condition in an economic model cannot be satisfied, then opting the next best solution involves changing other variables away from the values that would otherwise be optimal. In an economy with some uncorrectable market failures in one sector, government intervention to correct market failures in another related sector with the intent of increasing overall economic efficiency may actually decrease overall economic efficiency. So practically, it is always better to let two market imperfections cancel each other rather than making an effort to fix either one. Thus, it may be optimal for the government to intervene in the second market in a way that does not affect the first market. Therefore, the theory advises that there is a need to study the details of the situation before jumping to the theory-based conclusions, because an improvement in market perfection in one area may not necessarily imply a global improvement in efficiency. For example, there exists a monopoly that created pollutions as an outcome of its production process, and this pollution causes harm to the river nearby, affecting the outcome of the fishery industry in a negative way. Suppose in addition that there is nothing at all that can be done about the pollution without also reducing production. The government can, however, break up the monopoly of the firm creating pollution. But if the government does this, that is increasing the competition in this market, increases the production, and because pollution is an outcome of the production, so with increase in production, pollution also increases. Thus, it is not clear that eliminating the monopoly increases efficiency. Gains from trade in coal will increase, but externality from pollution will increase as well, possibly outweighing the gains from trade. This can be easily learned from the diagram as well. Consider a typical optimization problem with a given production possibility frontier considered as a boundary condition, indifference curves, and the optimum point is where the PPF is tangent to point P. Since this point lies on both the transformation line and indifference curve, it defines the production and consumption optima. When a new constraint condition is drawn, it can be easily seen that point P is no longer attainable because we are now at a lower indifference curve. Q could be a second best solution since it lies both on PPF and new CC. However, as the definition points out, the second best point would be R inside the transformation line. This is so because an improvement on welfare can only be attained by moving to point R, that is, movement to a higher indifference curve, which means an increase in welfare. The segment Mn is technically more efficient than R, but since the points on this segment are not attainable, R is the second best solution. Moving on to the Arrow's impossibility theorem. In social choice theory, Arrow's impossibility theorem states that when voters have 3 or more distinct alternatives, no SWF can convert the ranked preferences of individuals into a complete and transitive preference ranking, while also meeting the criteria of unrestricted domain, which is known as U, weak Pareto criteria represented by P, independence of irrelevant alternatives represented by I, and non-dictatorship represented by ND. Social choice rules, which is also known as SCR. A SCR is a rule to derive a social preference relation from individual preference relations. Formally, a SCR is a functional relation specified by the function f, where Rn approaches to R such that for all R1 and so on till Rn belonging to On, and the function R1 to Rn is equals to R, where R belonging to R and O is the set of orderings. That is, for any given profile of individual orderings, R1 to Rn belonging to On, function f produces one and only preference relation R called social preference relation. However, all along we will assume that individual preferences are rational, that is, the individual preferences are orderings. For all I is equals to 1, 2, 3 till n, Ri belongs to O. A collective choice rule is a functional relation f such that for any set of n individual orderings R1 till Rn, one ordering for each individual, one and only one social preference relation R is determined. R is equals to a function of R1 to Rn. Arrow's use of the expression social welfare function says that a collective choice rule that specifies orderings for the society is called a social welfare function. It is a particular type of collective choice rule such that each social preference that is determined by an ordering that is reflexive, complete and transitive. If the social preference relation generated by a SCR, that is F, is an ordering, we say that F is a social welfare function. Let D a proper subset of On. A SCR F represents D approaches to O is called a social welfare function if F such that for all R1 till Rn belonging to D and F, that is the function R1 till Rn belonging to O. Condition O. A SCR F satisfies condition O if it is a SWF, that is, if the range of function f is the set O. The four conditions that Arrow uses in his theorem are: condition U, unrestricted domain. A SCR F satisfies condition of unrestricted domain if its domain is On, that is D is equals to On. So, if a SCR F satisfies condition U, F generates a social preference relation for every possible profile of rational individual preferences. Condition P, weak Pareto criteria principle. A SCR F satisfies condition P if for all x and y belonging to x and for all I belonging to n, x p I y approaches to x p y. If everyone prefers x to y, then society must also prefer x to y. Condition I, independence of irrelevant alternatives. Take any S, a proper subset of x, and any two profiles of individual orderings, say R1 till Rn belongs to On and R-1 till R-n belongs to On. Let f R1 belongs to Rn is equals to R and f R-1 till R-n is equals to R dash. A SCR f satisfies condition I if the following holds: for all x and y belonging to S and for all I belonging to N, x R I y, if and only if x R dash I y. Arrow requires that social choice over a set of alternatives must depend on the orderings of the individuals only over those alternatives and not on anything else. Suppose the choice is between x and y and the individual ranking of x and y remains same, but the rankings of x vis-a-vis some other alternative z changes, or the ranking of z vis-a-vis some other alternative, say w, alters. What is required is that the social choice between x and y should still remain the same. Condition ND, non-dictatorship. A SCR F satisfies condition ND if there is no individual I belongs to N such that for all x and y belonging to x, R1 approaches to Rn belonging to On, x p I y is equals to or implies x p y. This implies that in every context wherein the dictator has strict preference, his preference will prevail over the rest of the society. That is, there should be no individual such that whenever he prefers x to y, society must prefer x to y irrespective of the preferences of everyone else. Arrow's impossibility theorem therefore says that there is no SWF that satisfy condition U, P, I and D simultaneously. In order to prove this theorem, if one tries to satisfy all the four conditions, they will not get satisfied simultaneously. For example, there exists a SWF F where D approaches to O that satisfies condition U, P and ND but does not satisfy condition I. Another example, consider three individuals 1, 2 and 3 and three alternatives x, y and z. Let individual 1 prefer x to y and y to z and individual 2 prefer y to z and z to x and individual 3 prefers z to x and x to y. It can easily be checked that x can defeat y by 2 votes to 1. Y can defeat z by the same margin. So, by transitivity requires that x should defeat z in a vote too. But in fact, z defeats x by 2 votes to 1. Thus, the method of majority decisions lead to inconsistencies because conditions P, I and D are satisfied but condition U is violated. Similarly, if U, P and I get satisfied, then ND will be violated, or if U, P and D are satisfied, then I will be violated and vice versa. So, there is simply no possibility of getting a SWF such that the four conditions stated are satisfied simultaneously. This is also called as Arrow's paradox. Moving on to the Rawls theory of justice. To illustrate Rawls' criteria of justice with a concrete example, we assume here that there are two people and only one good, say wealth. Let X be a social state in which one person's wealth is $1 million and other person's wealth is $0. Let Y be a social state in which the wealth of both is $1,000. Rawls argues that the social choice between X and Y, made from behind a veil of ignorance without any prior knowledge, should be Y. Not knowing whether he would be a millionaire or the pauper under X, each person ought to prefer Y because Y is guaranteed to be a tolerable level of wealth. That is, the Rawls criteria is to opt for the state that maximizes the utility of the person in the worst position or to maximize the minimum utility. It is therefore called the maximum criteria. Formally, let X is equals to x1, x2 till xn and Y is equals to y1, y2 till yn be the distributions of one good among n people. We say that X is Rawls superior to Y, written X R Y, if minimum of x1 till xn is greater than the minimum of y1 to yn. For instance, let X is equals to 50, 100, 150. Y is equals to 90, 90, 90. Then Z is equals to 80, 250, 250. Then the Rawls criteria says that Y is better than X, which is plausible. Going from X to Y sacrifices some total wealth. Total wealth of X is equals to 300 and total wealth of Y is equals to 270, but gains lots of equality. However, the Rawls criteria also says Y is better than Z, and in this case it sacrifices a great deal of total wealth. Total wealth of Z is 580 for the sake of some increase in equality. In fact, if real people named 1, 2 and 3 were choosing between Y and Z from behind the veil of ignorance, and if, like most real people, they were willing to take small risk for large potential gains, they would most likely choose Z in spite of Rawls' advice. So, in a world with many goods and in which individual tastes differ, the Rawls criteria may be impossible to apply. Let us now summarize what we have learnt in this module. Arrow's impossibility theorem is basically an example of the theory of second best because in Arrow's paradox also, all the optimality conditions cannot be satisfied simultaneously. The most discussed case of such inconsistency is the so-called paradox of voting. Rawls' theory of justice, on the other hand, offers a model of fair choice situation. It tries to establish justice by the means of fairness and equality. But the Rawls criteria, just like the fairness criteria, doesn't mesh well with the usual economic criteria. Just as the fairness criteria contradicts the more fundamental Pareto criteria, the Rawls criteria can contradict some other well criterion of welfare economics such as Calder, Skitowski and Samuelson criteria. But one thing that is common to all the three models is that all three are set in accordance to the general equilibrium analysis but can be extended to the partial equilibrium case as well.